everyone, to We Go Back. I'm your host, Bryan Abou Chacra, and I'm very excited to start this new podcast with you guys. In this first episode, we will be reviewing the first 2 episodes of Lost, the pilot part 1 and 2, and just kind of running down a list of notes that I took and sharing some thoughts that I had while I was watching the first 2 episodes of Lost. I did want to take an email right off the top because it thought it was a very good question I got from Walter. He's asking if this will be a first-time watcher-friendly podcast. And it will be. I don't see the need in really skipping ahead and revealing any big spoilers to anybody. More, I'm just going to kind of guide you to things that I think will help you just things to help you pay attention to. So I'm going to keep it focused really on the 2 episodes that I watch and maybe call back to previous episodes if I feel like it will strengthen the argument, but really I want to focus on those 2 episodes so we don't deviate too much from it. If you do have questions that you need answered that, go outside of what I'm watching, you can always email me at wegobackpodcast@gmail.com and I'll get you the answer or just have a discussion with you guys. I really don't mind. The whole point of this is to just kind of talk and have a fun time watching Lost. So yeah, anything you guys need, just send me an email there or hit me up on Twitter at KingLordBryan. But yeah, so let's jump right into the first episode, the pilot. I thought it was really cool that they called this episode the pilot, because typically that's the name of the first episode of any show. But in this case, as we find out, they're gonna go out to the jungle to find the pilot. So it kind of works as a double meaning. I don't know if that was intended. Maybe I'm just reading too far into it, but I feel like that's part of the fun of Lost is that you can read this far into it and it can kind of make sense. So that was cool. I really feel like it was clever. I mean, the way Lost writes everything, it had to have been that way, but I could be wrong. Who knows? I think it's cool that Jack wakes up alone because he kind of has to decide that he needs to, get through and kind of figure out what he needs to do by getting up on his own and having that composure and then kind of running towards the jungle, and then on the way to the jungle, he passes a white sneaker, which, this is one of those things I want to point out to you guys. That comes back, way later on in the show, that comes back. And it even comes back sooner than you'd think. You just had to be paying attention. And that's one of the things about Lost that, you can't be on your phone, you can't be talking to somebody else. I mean, you can be talking about the show, but it's not a passive show. I really would recommend if you're going to watch this show, and if you're listening to this podcast, then you probably already do this. But if you're going to be listening to this show, you're probably going to be watching Lost with a fine-tuned comb, which I would recommend. Really pay attention. A lot of the shots and the music and the things that they do, and there's one that's really cool that's coming up in a second that I really like because they put a lot of depth into it and it calls back later. So, that white sneaker, keep that in mind. I don't know if a lot of people know this. Not a lot of TV shows are shot on film, but Lost was. I think Seinfeld and Friends were also shot on film, but those were shot in studio. What impresses me the most about these first 2 episodes is how good it looks. And I have it on Blu-ray, and watching it on Blu-ray, I forgot how sharp it was because I watched it air on TV and it didn't look that good on broadcast television in 2004. I actually came into Lost at the second season, but we didn't have Netflix or whatever, and I didn't have a Blu-ray player. I don't even think Blu-ray was out then. It came out in 2005. So you didn't have high def, and I don't think I've ever really seen them in that high definition. And man, it looks like a movie. That's one of the things about Lost. It really looks good. I know I just talked about the cinematography, but the film quality, it's shot on film, which is really hard to cut and edit because you have to transport reels of film from Hawaii to Los Angeles because they did none of the cutting in Hawaii, and all of the show was shot in Oahu. So that's a lot of work to do, but it shows. That's why TV looks different now, is because of Lost. They made it look like a film, like a serial, and that I feel like it really set up as the standard for what we see on TV now. So you know, Jack is just like lost on this beach. Pun absolutely intended. And we kind of see him go through it. But the thing that always stood out to me about him was his demeanor. He was super calm. He kind of was always assessing the situation, trying to figure out what he had to do next to try to help people. And it wasn't something that that I paid attention to as much the first few watch throughs of Lost, but it's something that I definitely started to notice more and more. It's like eerily calm. Like, I don't know if I could be that calm during a crash, but who knows? Maybe you just have to resolve yourself. You're in survival mode. But you know, he goes and he tends to everybody else, and then he like runs away from the beach. And then there is when he's trying to like figure out what is wrong with him. You know, he's checking that wound, and I always thought that was weird that he like ran away from the beach, especially because he ends up needing somebody else's help. So that, you know, that, hey, maybe that's a theme of Jack right there, is that he feels like he has to bear the burden entirely on his own shoulders, and that he can't ask anybody for help. Maybe that's you know, one of the first indications of his character, because you know he goes over there and he can't reach the gash on his side to get it stitched up, and he has to have Kate, who walks out of the jungle, holding her wrists, and it's like, oh man, like if she wasn't there, what was he gonna do? He'd have to run back to the beach. So I always thought that was really really interesting, that he just never, you know, could be able to let go of that, like, oh, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. It's kind of like what they're telling you there, about Jack, at least. And so, you know, one of the things about Lost in the way that they shot it that I thought was really cool is that they would tell you things without having to spend too much time on it. Because the next shot that you see is Boone trying on a cell phone to get a signal reception, trying to get anything out. And it's kind of like letting you know without having to be like, well, has anyone tried their cell phone? I think that's really cool. Like a subtle way. You see it, it's prominent enough that you understand, okay, cell phones don't work. That's not going to happen here. And they don't have to like do that whole like, well, has anyone tried a cell phone? I thought that was cool. And then, you know, cuts back to Jack kind of going through why he's so calm. And I thought it was cool that they gave you that explanation pretty close on, because this ends up being a pretty significant story later on in the show, about him ripping the dural sack and letting the fear in for only 5 seconds, and then, you know, having to just get to work, get it done. Like, I think that's part of the burden that he bears, that he feels like he can't feel emotions, or he can't like try to understand his own emotions, because he has to get work done. It's a theory. We'll see as we watch. Let's see if that's something that pans out. It might not. I could be totally off base, but I think that that's kind of something that really speaks about his character. It's the only time, like, after all of that, that's the only time you see him cry. Like, a tear leaks out of his eye, and he's let his guard down for the first time after, like, trying to save him, you know, a bunch of other people's lives. I think that was cool that they did something like that and gave that character that subtle depth. Lost is in the subtlety. There's a lot of, like, really small things that you can notice if you want to notice, and that's one of the things I loved about this show, is that just you have to pay attention, and you'll notice as much as you can. You'll answer questions if you just pay attention. It will help you, but it's not going to hold your hand through everything. And I thought that was a really cool thing that not a lot of shows did before. They kind of just would hold your hand through everything, and it sucks. Lost will make you have to pay attention. So a thing that I never noticed in this opening scene, where they're all kind of settling in the evening, is the conversation with Sun and Jin. Jin tells Sun, like, you stay near me. You don't go anywhere else. Like, don't worry about the others. We have to take care of ourselves. And the first few times I watched that, I really felt like, man, this guy is a total dick. Why is he being such an asshole right now to this person? And and as I got older and being removed from watching the show for a few years, I realized, I mean, if I had just gone through a crash, I couldn't speak another language. I need to protect the person that I can communicate with, and that needs to be the most important thing, for both of us, because I care about this person. I don't know anything about anybody else. Like, I sympathize for them and I feel bad for them, but like, when it comes down to it, if you had to choose between somebody you loved, like in survival, but it goes between you, somebody you love, and people that, crash on a beach with you, you're going to save the person you love. And I didn't really pick up on that the first time. I don't know if that's here, but I feel like when I was able to come back and look at it with that, different perspective, it really changed how I felt about it. But yeah, a lot of stuff changed on a second viewing, and I got another email that I wanted to bring in, or bring up right now, from Ryan T. And he kind of was sharing with me just how he has also watched Lost a whole bunch, and that, there's a lot of meaning in the show, and undertones about like the meaning of life, and a lot of other themes like why we're here or why anybody is anywhere, and that is definitely something that does show up a lot in this show. But something that he said that I really agreed with was that each time he watches it, he gets something completely new out of it. And I feel like because it's been so long since I've watched Lost, I'm able to kind of see things anew because I've forgotten, small details of it. So I'm able to kind of see it with a fresher set of eyes and a different life perspective too. So I'm able to kind of like watch it, like renew it in a way, like, and see it in a totally different, or not totally different, but in a slightly different, new way. So it's kind of like watching it new, is what I'm getting at. And I felt like this time around, especially with these first two episodes, I'm like, yeah, I'm noticing a lot more different stuff, because I used to just focus on the same stuff that I had already picked up on before. And that's cool, because now you're kind of looking for different things because you don't know what you're looking for anymore. And I really like that about not watching it for a few years. But I thought it was really funny about that next shot, or not next shot, but the shot that you see of Charlie writing fate on his hands. Feel like that's Lost, like, being overt. I wrote later on that, because I think he changes it later when he gets his drugs back to late or something. And I wrote later on, I'm like, oh, I wonder why he changes it to late. Like, oh, is it because he's on his drugs? And I'm like, no, it's because I think Lost was just fucking with you. Even though right off the bat, they wanted to screw with your heads. And I thought I think that might have been one way that they did it. Because I'm pretty sure, like, he writes late. What does that even mean? He wrote fate before because it's like, oh yeah, what do you write after a crash? Even in writing that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's more significant. Now I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, no, it's absolutely, he just they're just messing with you. But they figure out that they need to go to the cockpit and try to get the transceiver, and immediately Kate wants to go and like figure out what's going on there, because we find out some things about her later, and she's very motivated to figure out if people know where they are, and that's when we're introduced to the monster for the first time, and we don't know what the hell is going on, much like everybody on the show. Up until this point, the whole show had been kind of like a survival show, and now we're like seeing that there's a little bit more to this island. What the hell is knocking down palm trees and making noises and like sirens, and what the hell is that thing? Imagine crashing on a fucking island, and you're like, dude, if surviving a fucking crash wasn't enough, what the hell is that? Come on. Anyway, but it sets the tone for the type of show. It's like, hey, we're gonna get weird pretty quick. And then and that takes us to a commercial break. Boom. We love that. You're gonna see a lot of that in Lost. Next thing you see is the flight attendant. Pay attention to that flight attendant. She'll come back later. You'll see her later. You'll see, like, I'll just tell you that. Just pay attention. You'll forget that it was her when you see her again. I'm not even feel bad about that one. The next day, when they're all standing on the beach, somebody makes a comment. I think it's Rose makes a comment that that sound it made, that the monster made, was so familiar. And then Shannon, I think, asks her, "Where are you from?" And she says, "The Bronx." Fun fact. Some of you already know this. Some of you may not know this. Some of you will now know this. The sound, the tiki 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 sound, tiki room sound, is a ticket being printed from a cab driver's like fare machine. That is absolutely where the sound comes from a New York cab. So that was like, they didn't need to write that into the show, but that's them, writing something clever in, letting you know where that sound comes from, because we've all heard that, one of those old style printers, and the way that they sounded whenever we ride a cab or go to an old supermarket, if you even still have those, you'll hear that, like, that sound. Look for it. It's pretty interesting, and I thought it was cool that they told you where it was coming from. So they're all walking, or Jack, Kate, and Charlie are walking to go to the cockpit, and in this scene, Kate is like, "Oh, have we ever met? I mean, I know I don't know you from somewhere, but have we ever met?" Like, the answer is yes, and you'll see. But they don't realize where, and it's because he's in Drive Shaft. But I thought that was really cool that they kind of had this like overlap thing, because like even later on in the next episode, you see how the stories already overlap. You see Charlie running by Jack in the plane, and it's really cool to see, that the stories will be shown from different perspectives based on each character. And then the next shot, I wrote this down. In the next shot, it shows that dog. We still don't know what that dog is at this point. Hiding in the shadows, and I just wrote down, "The monster is not the dog." I don't know why. But if you're a first time watcher and that was your thought, the monster is not the dog. You cut back to to the beach where everybody's raining, like as they're walking, and they're all talking about, end of the world type weather. You cut back to the beach and it's raining, and Locke is the only one who's like sitting on the beach and embracing the island. Like everybody's freaking out and like trying to find shelter, and he just sits there and like puts his hands up and like welcomes in the rain. I thought that was like a pretty telling foreshadowing, if you will, for his type of character. Like he's very open to being on this island. And yeah, I mean, a lot is really set up in this first episode about who these types of people are going to be from this point on, and that's really good, because that's what you want in a first episode. But what I really liked is that they really didn't dive too far deep into who these characters were, because you really got to sort of learn the characters as the characters learned each other, and that I think was a really cool thing to be able to do that. It's a pretty big deal to not give you like that much background on the people. I feel like that's all you ever get in a show, and in the first episode, and you don't get to like get a feel for what the show is going to be like, and you're kind of trying to sell me on the show, not the characters, I feel like. And they sold me on the show, not the characters. Like, these characters are pawns being moved in the show almost, which is funny if you've watched it. Yeah. So we'll move on to just some kind of other funny observations that I had as I went through the last little bit of the show. Like Charlie disappears as they're in the cockpit, and the pilot, they're in there talking to him. They just kind of like forget about Charlie, and you kind of don't even think about it either. They almost tell you that he's forgettable with the conversation that they have, where he keeps being like, Charlie's fine in this first episode. But yeah, when Kate asks him why he was in the bathroom, and he's like, what? And we're all kind of like, I felt like the first time I watched that, I'm like, why would you ask him? Why was he in the bathroom? He was probably going to the bathroom. But if you think about it, you're in a crashed plane. Like, why would you go into the bathroom? It's a really weird time to be going, like, to be following, like civility is I guess what I'm saying. So I find it pretty interesting that he's, using the bathroom when he doesn't have to. And we find out why later. But, everything goes crazy in there and they have to run off. And I really like the way that it's shot when they're running away from the smoke monster, because it's a really cool, that whole sequence is really cool and intense, and you're freaking out and you're feeling that tension. And the music in Lost by Michael Giacchino is incredible the entire show. It really like puts that feeling of the show, the tension and the mood like into it. And whenever I listen to the soundtrack, because yes, I absolutely listen to the soundtrack on its own, I really can like feel the emotion that he's trying to explain or convey in his score. And I thought that was really cool. So we get, everybody running in, and I always thought it was really funny when Kate runs into the banyan trees and is like hiding in there and is like, starts to count. She looks like exactly like Gollum in that scene. I don't know how else to describe it. I don't mean like, she just looks like Gollum. Go back and watch it. Tell me she doesn't look like Gollum. I swear to God, she looks like Gollum. Absolutely. 100%. Fun little tidbit, they get out and they get to the end of the show, but a fun little tidbit was that originally Jack was supposed to die in the first episode of Lost. And I think that that's known, by a lot of people, but I think it bears, to be repeated here. Cause that shot, the reveal of the pilot hanging up in the trees, and then you see, Jack come out or not, you don't see him, but you hear him off screen. It was supposed to be Jack. They really wanted to like make you feel that like shock of, oh my God, oh, this guy who we thought was supposed to be, the main guy is not, and he's dead. Kind of like Game of Thrones, but who knows, if they got who came first. It was Game of Thrones. But anyway, that's something that's really cool to think about. It was supposed to like, imagine the show without Jack. If you've seen it, imagine the show without Jack. Like, how would they have written around that? Would the pilot have been like the basic character of Jack? I wonder. But we got what we got. And then, the show ends on its customary cliffhanger. You see the pilot and you're like, what the hell could do that to the pilot? And that's the first episode of Lost. It kind of really sets the tone for what kind of show you're getting yourself into here, which is really cool, that they were able to put on a film quality production, with these first two episodes, because it continues. I think they were shot in tandem, and I don't believe they were aired at the same time. But it was, they were shot together, and they was, shot actually way before the rest of the first season. And that's something I'll point out again, on the next episode, because I think on that one is when you first start to see, like how they actually looked in that season. But let's go right into, the part 2 of the pilot. I wanted to mention this, but I forgot in the intro of the show, the title card of the show. You never get to see that whole logo in focus or whatever until it's like right up in your face. And if you don't know already, that's something that J.J. Abrams threw in like motion or something like that. Like threw together in motion like 15 minutes because they needed a title card for the show. They didn't have an intro for the show. So he threw that together, and in his haste, and this is the part that I always notice, and they never fixed it. In his haste, he didn't render the project file. So if you notice on the broad side of the S, there's a little bit of like noise on the S, like it didn't render right or something. And whenever that title card comes up, that's all I can look at. So now that's all you're going to be able to look at. Sorry, but I don't care. You get the next shot of Charlie. This is going to be Charlie focused. It'll be, I think, Kate as well, but you get a little bit of Charlie in this one. And this is when you find out why he was in the bathroom. He he does drugs. He does. Hey guys, it's heroin. He does drugs, and I thought it was really cool that they had a guy on their show who did drugs, and they kind of show you him doing drugs on broadcast TV. That's not something you normally get to see. Lost did a lot of stuff that you normally didn't get to see on TV. You got to watch a man do drugs in an airplane. But you get to see that little overlap there where he runs past Jack and has that little exchange. And I thought that was cool that you got to see it from a different angle. He goes into the bathroom and then the plane starts crashing and, he gets out and is laying on that wall. And then that cart comes down and almost hits him. I didn't point this out about the first episode, but this is now the second time that this guy has been like near something that almost killed him. When the plane explodes in the first episode, like the turbine lands behind him and he just kind of like is totally like shocked. Like he doesn't even, it barely registers. And then again here, it almost crushes him. That's really interesting because I don't think you see anybody else nearly run into that many issues. So pay attention to that because I will be too. That's something that I didn't notice the first many times. So I only noticed it this time. That is really interesting that happens so close together. I thought it was really interesting how they dealt with the whole Jin, Sun, and Michael dynamic in the scene where they're on the beach. Like, I know, and I just said that it was like he was being protective of her, and I think that he still is, but he's also a kind of a jealous person, and this is the first time that we're supposed to see that maybe this guy has some issues that he needs to deal with. Like, maybe it's not just like, he's a strong man and she has to listen to him, but maybe he also has some jealousy issues. Who knows? Like, I never kind of picked up on that the first few times, and I kind of just realized that right now. But this kind of services to lead us to Walt finding these handcuffs. And that takes us to, a big old fight on the beach with Sawyer and Saeed and all this stuff that, like, the mudslinging and everything. And Saeed actually calls him a son of a dog. He says Ibn Kalb, which is Arabic, which I thought was cool because in the script they didn't write what he was supposed to say. So I don't know if he came up with that because he's not Arab, he's Indian. He's from the UK, but he's of Indian descent, I believe. And yeah, so he called him the son of a dog, and being called a dog in Middle Eastern culture is not good. Like, it's a pretty big insult. Cause dogs live outside and they're dirty animals and weird thing. I don't understand it. Dogs are cool. Cause like, have you seen dogs now? Like they live in fucking purses. Like they, they're probably better off than we are, if anything. So you kind of want to be a dog, like Iggy Pop, in the Stooges. But yeah, so that's what he calls him. If you never knew what he said, if you didn't look it up or didn't care, now you know. After that, they had the transceiver and they tell him about the pilot and Saeed, offers to help with that. And the shot where he says, we're going to need to get higher to fix it. I always thought that shot was really funny. Like, again, Lost has a way of being funny in small ways, like little bits of humor. And it's slowly panning up the mountain to reveal the height of the climb that they have to go on is so funny. And like, she wears that emotion on her face so well. You're like, yeah, I feel ya. I would hate to have to walk that, but I definitely don't want to be stuck on this island because fuck that. So yeah, that always made me laugh. But now we have a lot more of setup for these characters in this episode. You get to learn a little bit more about like who Charlie is. You find out that he's, a heroin addict. Because at this point, you know that Jack's a doctor, but you don't really know that much about anybody else. And you get to kind of learn a little bit more about everybody. And I thought that that was a really cool way to kind of, like I said, introduce the show and then the characters. Because it's not like you can't have one without the other, but I feel like you're able to hook people more on a theme than you are on certain characters, and characters can come by and kind of like augment it. Like, I think a good example of that is in How I Met Your Mother. In the first few seasons, you had Barney, and he was so good because he kind of like heightened the moods and was a really good foil to the kind of like already ridiculous but more of a hyper exaggeration of like a normal life. And then you have Barney, who ends up being like a cool character that everybody loves. In Lost, they really wanted it to be a good balance because the show, the story, the themes, and the characters all work together. And that's what I think helped me really get into the show, because you could get a lot from it. Like I said, all you had to do was you just had to pay attention. So from there, we now know that Charlie has his drugs back, and now he's using again on the beach. And I never really picked up on how many times he was high in this show. Like, I didn't really think about it, but anytime he's like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and like he did a really good job of keeping it like subdued, but I never realized how much like he got dragged into shit just because he was high. Like, this whole expedition to go up, he walks up back to the group, and Shannon's like, "Yeah, you're coming, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, absolutely." And he just gets dragged along on this journey because he's high. And the first trip he went on, he got dragged on because he wanted to get his stash, to see if he could find it. That's the only reason he went. He did not go for any other reason, which is something that like I feel like gets overlooked, but I feel like I even overlooked it. But it's there. And Sawyer had already kind of had his words with Saeed, but ends up joining them on this. And I thought that this was really cool because it shows you a different dimension of Sawyer. In this one, you're kind of seeing that Sawyer, because I believe that you had also just seen him sitting on the beach, maybe reading a letter, and you see in his whole demeanor like remorse. And because of that, I think is whatever that was, that motivates him to join this trek. And follow these guys to try to get off this island, because he realized he wasn't being helpful, I think, and he was trying to help. And I didn't really pick up on that before. I thought he just kind of like showed up, and I was just like, oh, he's here now. I'm really picking up on a lot of different stuff that I didn't notice when I watched it the first time. That's cool, because that makes watching this, like I said, almost like a new way of watching it. This next, as they're walking, the score here, this is totally like a personal thing. I love the soundtrack for whenever they're going on a long trekking journey. That movement, that music that Michael Giacchino writes for it is it perfectly encompasses like we're going on a journey and we don't know what we're getting into, but it's like we're gonna go explore and we're gonna go find some new information about this crazy island that has a monster on it, and we need to get off of because we just crashed. But I mean, that music I really enjoyed in that scene. It always fits really well, and I feel like the music, like I said, is really, if you're into movie scores or orchestrated music, Michael Giacchino is a good guy to listen to, because he does a really good job of making you feel an emotion with the music. And I think a lot of people, total sidetrack, but a lot of people listen to music, and they pay attention to lyrics, but they don't listen to like the melody and the song and the way that moves as much. And I feel like if you look at them all together, moving together as one thing, that is what an orchestra is. And that is one of the things that I really like about orchestrated music, is you can have your lead players, but the whole group plays together and you get this fantastic sound. And it's so big and Lost. And really, really comes in and helps to, it does its job. It really fits the mood of the show very well. So that's why I keep bringing it up, and I'll bring up the music every time I think about it and write it down, because I think it's something that's super interesting to note. You don't realize how much music is in the background of something. You know, you go to a movie, and I think they did a statistic once. People thought like that there was music maybe 40 to 50% of the time in the movie or something like that. And it's like there's music in the movie 85 to 90% of the time. Like a score or some sort of like music is always there, because music really does a good job of making you feel something, especially a really well done score. And I really appreciate the work that goes into that, and will continuously bring it up. I thought it was really interesting when we get back to the beach, and Michael's talking with Jack about his son. It tells you in that scene that, you know, Michael doesn't really know that much about his son, because he's asked how old he is, and he says 9 first, and then I think he ends up being 10. And it's like, yeah, they don't have a strong relationship then, huh? Like, you're seeing sort of like one of the first themes starting to come in, you know, like relationships with people that you're supposed to be close with, not always the best relationships. Maybe maybe it's not what you should be focusing on, is like, hey, I should have a great relationship with my family, but maybe with the people that you know, do something important in your life, or, you know, help you out. I think that's a theme that we'll definitely come back and see in this show, and I'll definitely note it when I see it again. But that's really cool, because a lot of this just subtlety. I guess also I'm watching the show with a really, really fine tooth comb right now, so I'm like picking up on probably anything that half this stuff probably has no meaning, and I'm like looking way too deep into it. But I feel like a father not knowing his son's age is telling you something. Walt, we find out, is actually with this man Locke, and Locke is a very interesting looking guy with a huge scar over his eye, and brings up another theme that we're gonna see go throughout this show. You know, he's talking about this game, backgammon, how it's been around for 5,000 years. It's older than any religion, and it's older than Jesus Christ. But that game has been around for so long. That's a really, really big point that he brings up, and he holds. One side is light, one side is dark, and the light is over his clear eye, and the dark is over his black eye, or his cut eye. Like, that theme, the whole idea, very important. It's letting you know, and the fact they had it that early in the show, so cool. I mean, like, I love this show because they had this stuff that was in there from the beginning. You can go back and watch it and see it, and when you see it, it's like, whoa! I can't believe they actually had that in there all the way back then. So we then see Jin kind of walking around after he's prepared this plate with different food, and it's kind of funny because, you know, in the previous conversation we'd seen with him, he was saying how they should stay by themselves, but I think he kind of realized that they might not be here for, you know, only a day or something. Like, they might be here for a while, so I think he might have had a little bit of a change of heart, and he goes around and he tries to give people food, and Hurley doesn't want it. That scene was like, he's just so funny. Hurley's such a good, he brings such a good energy to that show. Whenever you see him, you're just happy he's there. I don't think I've ever met anybody who thinks that character is annoying. I would be interested to see if anybody does, and if they do, please, hey, and just like anything, if you ever don't agree with me or have a different opinion, I want you to let me know. So please email me or you know, send me a tweet or whatever. Let me know what you think. If you disagree with me, if you have an opinion, I'd like to think about it and talk about it, and you know, share it with other people, because other people might be thinking about it. So please let me know when you have any opinion at all about what I say, especially if you disagree. You know, this scene I thought was really interesting because he comes up to Claire and she tells him, you know, she doesn't want any of the food, and when she finally eats it, that's the first time Claire feels the baby since the crash. And like, we get a little bit of joy. He doesn't want to be there, but he's like, doesn't want to touch her belly, and she's like freaking out because she's so elated. She's worried about her baby. She's a mother. And I think I want to say that calls back to something later in the show. It calls back to that, I mean. So wait for that. I think I might be reading into it too much, and if I ever don't answer a callback, if I say, hey, this calls into something and you don't see it, or I don't talk about it, again, let me know. I'll explain it. More than happy to pepper it in. I really hope at some point it's not just me only reading my notes. My notes, I'm just kind of like, I took a lot. I really want to see your guys' input and what you guys thought about it and your theories that you're having, and kind of, incorporate that as I'm talking along with you guys. But yeah, so we get this, like, we get to see him like help her feel her baby for the first time. That's awesome, because it would suck to lose a child after having a plane crash. Oh God. But then we get to see that Kate is the fugitive. We're on the plane, and Kate is sitting there and trying to drink her juice, and all this stuff happens. And in the first episode, she talks about not blacking out, and I think it's because in this scene you see that she can't get her mask on until like after all this crap went on, and I think that's because oxygen, like what they feed you through there is oxygen. It calms you down. I think it helps you pass out, so you go ragdoll. So if there is a crash, you're not all tensed up. I think. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, sorry. If I'm not, again, might be reading into it too much. But I always wondered why she never blacked out and other people had, like Jack did. But in this scene, you see her put her mask on and then put it on, the person beside her. And that guy is, the marshal who's there to condemn her, take her to jail for something, like something big, apparently, if he's going to travel all the way to Australia to go get her. But she still saves his life. She does the right thing. I think that's a really interesting point. So then we go back to the guys going up with the transceiver trying to get a signal out, and they encounter that polar bear, and Sawyer is like the only one who stands tall and doesn't try to like run away. He has a gun, but he's willing to like face what he needs to survive. I feel like I felt like that was a kind of a clear point, because he didn't pull the gun out until he knew what he was looking at, and then when he did, that's when he fired. And that's, if you ever take a gun safety class, it's like you don't take out your gun unless you need to. And the fact that he was very well aware of what he was going to shoot at before he started to shoot at it, I thought, kind of showed a part of his character that we didn't see before. You see that he's not just this kind of asshole, but maybe he's trying to be helpful. And that part I always thought was really cool. That he just stood tall. Everybody just ran away. And then, they have the whole thing where they're all freaking out that he has a gun, and they're a little tense, and Kate takes his gun and then does this little like song and dance about not knowing how to use the gun, and like, how do you take it? I want to take it apart. I thought that part was really cool, because Sawyer saying, I've seen girls like you before, and her response of, oh, not exactly girls like me. First time I saw that, I thought that's a little weird. Like, oh, she's a tough girl. I think he's telling her he knows something about her for sure. And that's why she walks off and goes and stands in the corner, or there's no corner in the forest. In the jungle, there is no corner. But she goes and stands off by herself for a second to collect herself, because they're letting you know that she's the fugitive. Subtlety in that, like, hey, you saw these handcuffs, and they're all there. And one of these people is that criminal, but we don't know who, and we don't know what they did, for one. And yeah, I didn't pick up on that kind of exchange there. He was explaining to her, I know you're the one who was being transported by the U.S. Marshal. And that was really cool. And then you get the flashback, and it shows her in the plane, solidifying that she is, you know, the fugitive. But you also see her put on the air mask for herself, and then she puts it on the U.S. Marshal. And I thought that was really cool because it tells you a couple of things. One, that's why she didn't black out, because she didn't put on her air mask, and I believe they pump oxygen through those air masks, so that'll make you lightheaded, and I believe it can, like, some people pass out from it. And she puts it on the U.S. Marshal as well, even though she knows that guy can take her to jail because he's the only one who knows what she's done on this plane. I think Sawyer definitely knows, but she's definitely trying to preserve herself, but doesn't want to see somebody die, and that's something that I think is really interesting that I hadn't really seen or noticed as much before. So, you know, they get the distress call, and it's been going on for 16 years, and the woman has been stranded there, presumably maybe still there, which I thought was really cool. Like, they gave you a lot of really good information in this scene. They told you that there's a power source on the island. So first of all, this isn't some unknown island. There's electricity, and there's a way of transmitting. Then there's somebody who was here, and she was here as early as 16 years ago. Who knows if that person is dead or what? But that person was there, and it's likely because that distress call is still playing that she's still there or died there, or who knows, and you're doomed. Because if there was a rescue party, they'd turn off the distress call. So now it's setting up that, like, they're really not in a place that's normal. And you hear Charlie say, "Guys, where are we?" And I think that these first two episodes of Lost are such a great introduction to the type of show that you get, because it really just tries to do something that pushes you to look at the show a little differently. And again, at the time, you didn't have a show like this. You didn't have Breaking Bad. You didn't have Game of Thrones. You didn't have anything that really allowed you to dive that deep into it, especially something that ended up being as big, like commercially big as it was. Now we have all these shows. The only other show before it was like Sopranos, and that ran at the same time as this show, towards the end, and there was so much depth and so much to see in this show, and they kind of were letting you know right off the bat, there's gonna be a lot of things to pay attention to here. You crashed on this island. This person's a fugitive. This person just killed a polar bear. There's a monster. Somebody's been stranded here before. This is what a cool setup episode. It really kind of puts you in a really good mindset to watch this show. And I'm really excited. The weirdest thing about watching Lost and doing the show this time around is that I don't get to watch it the way I normally do, which I will watch marathon days. Like, as I said in the first episode, this was like the first show to binge watch. I would watch this show when it first came out to get caught up, because I came in the second season. I would watch it from the morning to the end of the day. I would get up in the morning and watch as much of the show as I could, and then go to sleep, like 12 hours of watching the show to get caught up. Not because I needed to, but because I was so excited to see what happened next. So watching this show and doing this podcast and having to limit myself is kind of like watching the show again, because I don't get to just skip ahead. I can, and in the case of this episode, I'm actually 4 episodes in terms of notes, but I'm going to record them before I release them, because I really want to hear from you guys. I really want your guys' emails and feedback and things that that you want to have answered or explained or anything. I really want to hear from you guys on this show, because I feel like that's really what's going to make this fun, and I want it to be fun. I hope me talking for an hour isn't going to be too boring for you guys. I don't think it will be if we can have like a pretty fun conversation about it. So send me all of your thoughts, anything. WeGoBackPodcast@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at KingLordBryan. This episode is on iTunes. I think I should have a link somewhere on there if you don't get it from iTunes. Otherwise, you can get it on SoundCloud if you don't have a Apple device. So SoundCloud.com/WeGoBack. And I really hope to keep putting these out for you guys and hearing from you. That's really going to be a big thing that I think will help make this a lot more fun for everybody. And off the top, since I introduced this podcast, I'm really excited about the response from so many people so far. So thank you so much for being as excited as I am about this show. And, it's going to be a lot of fun to go through it again. And for those people who are going through it for the first time, thank you for making me part of your experience. It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope I don't let you down. I will try not to, so I know I won't let you down, because whenever I try something, I get it done. Anyway, thank you guys for listening to this podcast. We'll be back next week with a new episode. I hope to hear from you soon. You guys have a good day. Take care.